Da 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 dun. That's it. That's the intro.
I said, okay. I'll say,
I think that's a good joke. I like it.
all right.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TV Guys, the show that has the over under for how many times I'm going to say macabre this episode, about 12. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian, and we have a special guest.
He's holding up his hand just so that everyone
What are you
knows.
talking? This isn't my hand. This is Thing.
Oh, you're right. Where's the scarring?
This is he got better.
It's like Captain Ron. Oh, I've always been a fast healer and I believe in Jesus and everything, so that helps.
I was thinking more like Monty Python. Like, she turned me into a newt. I got better.
That was the other reference that I had thought of, but I just Captain Ron doesn't get enough love. Kurt Russell does such a fun job in that movie, and he's got some great one-liners. So,
Yeah.
well, we're not here to talk about Kurt Russell. He's never been in an Addams Family before. So,
No.
all right. Well, Addams Family has been around for. It started actually in as a comic strip in the 40s, I
I thought it
believe.
was. I didn't know the 40. I thought it was a comic strip before the movies.
It was, yeah, in the New Yorker. It was done by a guy whose last name Adams. I don't remember what his first name is. You know, for being a podcast, we're professionals. We totally know things. And so, I could have looked this up and had this actual information ready to go. But nope, I'm just relying on my the trivia in the back of my head. But some guy with last name Adams started writing Addams Family as a comic strip. Then it got picked up by ABC in the late 50s and 60s to go for 3 seasons. That I do remember. And then, like all these years later, we have this show. Addams Family's been around for nearly 100 years.
So, was
So
there anything between the show in the 60s and the movies in the 90s? Was there like no new Addams Family in the 70s or 80s?
there was something in the 70s. I believe it was like a TV special, but
Okay.
they did some sort of reboot that didn't go anywhere in the 70s. And then there wasn't anything in the 80s. And then there was the films with
Yeah.
Raul Julia and Angelica Houston. And I do love Addams Family. I've always been a fan of the concept, but they haven't always done it well. Like, did you see the recent animated movies?
I haven't. No.
The second one is garbage. The first one, it, it's not good, but it's not bad. It's like it's
Mm.
they try and they get some parts of the Addams Family charm, but at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, like there's this really good idea of them being different, and like they capture the Addams Family feel really well in that first movie. But it's not a fantastic movie. It's just like, okay, I saw it, and there's some things that are good, and but it is a kids movie.
Yeah.
Second one is just like really bad.
Okay. So, what did you think about Wednesday? Did you like it or not overall?
So real quick, we are going to get into spoilers of Wednesday.
Yep.
So if you haven't seen that show, it is on Netflix right now. You can go watch it for yourself. And there's a lot that I have to say. So I'm going to start off with my biggest negative on it. And as an Addams Family fan, I feel like the overall world building that they did in this was very much not Addams Family, but yet there was still some good personality of these characters that was Addams Family. So
Mhm.
for instance, like one of the big inciting incidents is Wednesday dropping a bunch of piranhas into a pool to attack bullies. And sure, that's fine for the story and how you can launch a story that way, but the violence and the gore and the mythos too with the monsters that they get into later, like a lot of this, there's just these liberties where that they've taken that pull it out of being Addams Family, because really for me definitive Addams Family is that original show in the 60s.
Mhm.
And we actually talked about this about a year ago when we did like a history of TV. And one of the things that we hit on the 60s is that in the middle of the Cold War, that there was kind of this idea about McCarthyism and your neighbors being communists and maybe even sleeper cells for the Soviet Russia and the
Yeah.
USSR. And so there's a lot of this like keep an eye on your neighbors, the ones that are weird and the ones that are quiet. The if you see something, say something, even though that phrase really came more in like the Bush 9/11
Yeah.
terrorist era. But there was a lot of this watch your neighbor sort of stuff. And so Adam's Family kind of was a response to that of saying, there's people that are going to be around you that maybe they're weird and maybe they're different, but even the weird and different ones, they are a good family unit. Like, they, just because they're weird and different doesn't mean they're not a good family.
Yeah.
And so Addams Family and like the Munsters, they were shows to kind of lampshade that idea of the time. And so the Adams with Wednesday, I don't
Yeah.
feel like they really took that heart. Instead, they leaned into the Tim Burtonness and they
Yeah.
created this amalgam of both an Adams Family and like this like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen type
Yeah.
thing where they combined two different mythos. And there's a lot to me that didn't work in that.
I get that to a point. I still love the show as a whole. I didn't like the piranha scene. It wasn't my favorite. It's kind of like in one of the movies from the '90s. They start with them on the roof, like pouring a boiling water on carolers, but we didn't actually see it.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, there's a lot of that, like, if you take it to its logical extreme, then yeah, they would be demented and they would be evil, and like, they joke about death and they joke about doing things that would get someone killed, and then yet when there's an actual killer going around, then there's Wednesday of like, oh, what moral high ground, they're the actual serial killer, I can't believe they would do something so horrible. And
mm,
it's like, well, if you really went to the full extreme you're saying, but still Wednesday has to me always been more nihilistic and a
mm,
little bit like with the things that she says being almost suicidal, cries for
yeah,
help, like, it would be good if I died, that
yeah,
sort of behavior and attitude, instead of like, I actively want to torment and hurt people.
yeah,
Sure, she'll say stuff about like torturing Pugsley and talk about like people deserving to be hurt,
yeah,
um but you never see her really follow through. Like, see, this is hard because it's like, it is a nuance. Sure, she
yeah,
does torture. It's like a cartoon, even in the live action. Sure, she'll torture her brother, but it's not like visceral and it's not gory and he's not actually being tortured. It doesn't actually hurt him. And
yeah.
so for this show, for them to have the real consequences of that cartoony behavior, that was what to me wasn't what Addams Family's about.
Mm, yeah. I get that. So basically this turned into like Adam's Family meets Scooby Doo Mystery meets Harry Potter living at Hogwarts.
Yeah, there's a bit of that.
There's a bit of, and but here's the thing is that I loved it. Okay, I loved it. I mean, and maybe I know maybe you're not as into it. I like those kinds of shows, and I thought there was some great stuff they did.
Yeah, so if we put aside the complaints I had about the
Yeah,
un-Addams Family-ness of certain things, the story they crafted was good. I was intrigued by it, and I thought it was a good mystery that
yeah,
they're doing. And that I thought was like, yeah, this has good writing,
mhm,
and there was a lot of like the lines, like just even in the last episode of,
yeah,
someone calls Wednesday a cockroach, and she's like, flattery will get you nowhere. Like, that is
yeah,
classic Wednesday lines.
yeah,
So they got that part of it.
mhm,
It's just some of the other stuff that I had mentioned. So
yeah.
yeah, I overall I will say it's good and I liked it, but I just wanted to lead off my big complaint.
So as far as the mystery, it's one of those where it's like everybody is a suspect, and later on we find out that the monster has a master because it's a hide, and it became like, oh, now there's two. Who's the monster? Who's the master? So Matt, I figured out the master, but not the monster. Did you figure out either of them beforehand?
I was the same way. When they introduced, because I kind of closed my eyes to the fact that it could be Tyler, because I'm like, it's probably going to be Christina Ricci for a couple of reasons. What solidified it for me probably was the same for you, was when she gave the copy of Frankenstein to Wednesday.
No, it
And
wasn't that
then
for me.
and then when we see later that episode when Wednesday's exploring like the house, and there's all of these like collected body parts, it's like, well, that is exactly like Frankenstein. So it's like, hey, we created this person with this Frankenstein idea, and who's the person who alluded to Frankenstein? Christina Ricci.
For me,
So
is much more just like meta outside of the show, because my thought is, okay, you bring in Christina Ricci as Wednesday because she was Wednesday, you get that.
yep.
But for her to be more than just a cameo, like I could have seen it be like, hey, look, hi, bye, I'm here. But she was a series regular. And about maybe 2/3 of the way in, I started to realize they haven't done anything with this character. Like she's a nothing character. And
Mhm.
they wouldn't bring her around and keep her around just to do nothing with her. And
Yeah.
that's kind of when I started to suspect, oh, okay, they're saving her. And then that's when I figured out she was the master.
Yep. And the other part of it too was there wasn't anything negative about her at the outset because you have the suspicion for Gwendolyn Christie's character. You have this suspicion for any of the teens
Yeah.
around her except for maybe her roommate. So there's a lot of different things as like the lack of evidence pointing to her was evidence in and of
Yeah.
itself.
Well,
So,
and here's the thing that obviously it wasn't going to be Xavier because he was the obvious one that Wednesday thought it was going to be. You're not going to
yeah,
have a mystery and say like, have the main character say, "I think it's you" on the first episode. It'd be like, "Yep, she's right." Like that's not a good mystery story.
exactly.
I thought. I mean, and then they made us think maybe he was going to be the master. I didn't really know what to think about him. But yeah, I mean, if you think it's Xavier, then that's the show's a little bit more clever than that.
Exactly. I mean, I still had fun along the way, and I think having the double issue was good, and the fact that to have her Gwendolyn Christie as a shapeshifter was a different level of here's another mystery that we had
Yeah,
that you
I
didn't
didn't see that
realize you
coming.
needed to answer. Yeah, that was a
I,
good one.
yeah, I love the when they went to the Blackstone. Is it the Blackstone house or when they find Laurel's bedroom?
Yep.
Because that was cool too. I mean, not only was it the another round of the mystery, and like they're seeing the picture and looking at the room, like I could even see that being like an episode of Supernatural too. And then all of a sudden they get attacked by a monster. Like there are
Yep.
Supernatural episodes that are just like that, or Scooby Doo episodes, maybe less extent with the monster because Scooby Doo doesn't get that intense.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think that the mystery too, the way that they solved it and the way that they unfolded it was we talk about pacing a lot in these sorts of shows, and I felt like the pacing of this was really well done. It
Mm-hmm.
was the right amount that we needed, and it gave us enough like twists and turns, even for you and I who saw that the Christina Ricci reveal coming. And I think a part of it too is when like that gets in your head of like it probably is her. You look for all the evidence, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's like everything is confirmation for you.
Well,
So
and there was one episode I watched a second time. I watched it with my girlfriend and her kids, and I had seen all the way through, and it was the episode of when they went to the house, and I'm watching it knowing things. I'm like, it's so obvious. Like they just left Tyler, and then the monster shows up. Like,
yeah. Yeah, and then like Wednesday in the last episode, like, oh, good, that was a smart play to hurt yourself to make it looking like, I wasn't even paying attention to that. I was still focused on Richie. So
that's why I haven't done it. It'd be interesting to watch with these kind of shows, with mystery shows. It's interesting to watch through a second time knowing it because then you pick up on the clues and different stuff you missed the first time around.
yeah. Yeah, there was a little bit of time when I was like, it could go the way where it's hit her therapist, and then she started to suspect her therapist, or like her therapist made like this comment when she was there with the headmaster, and she's just like, well, my report's not going to be very favorable, and there's like two more episodes to go. I'm like, okay, she can't be turning into a baddie already,
Yeah.
so it's definitely not
So
her.
Matt, you're gonna have to help me out. There's a line I don't remember what it's from. I think it's from a TV show. I know it's from a TV show or movie. Maybe you can place it where the character was like, "It's never who you most expect. It's also
Oh, it's
not who you least expect. It's
that's
whoever
Dwight.
you." It's right. It is Dwight from The Office. It's whoever I most medium suspect.
Yes. Yeah, and I felt like again with Christina Ricci is that it wasn't even that you medium suspected her. You just there wasn't anything pointing to her, and for a
Mm-hmm.
show that's going to take you and kind of lead you on the mystery, because there's some mysteries where it invites you to solve it yourselves. And
Yeah.
I feel like Agatha Christie does that a lot with her mysteries, where she
Mm-hmm.
invites you to solve it yourself while taking you along the ride.
Yeah.
But I felt like this show was less, hey, let's have you solve it yourself. And it's more like we're going to feed pieces of evidence to you along the way, and we're going to show you what to pay attention to, and we're going to kind of help direct your suspicion. And so that's why knowing ahead of time that that was kind of how this show was unfolding, that was the evidence for me.
Yeah. So one thing I think they did well, one thing I think they did not as well. I love the relationship between Wednesday and Enid.
Yep.
The whole, because it's the obvious, like she's bubbly and happy and yay, colorful, and then Wednesday is how Wednesday is. And
Hmm.
at the end, Wednesday even said, "We shouldn't work, but we do," and that it was Wednesday who initiated a hug at the end was maybe a cheesy moment, but I think it was like a full circle. They accept each other kind of moment.
Yeah, and I think the production design and the costuming for both of them helps set that apart. But especially having their room just being divided right down the middle, and to showcase that with the window of the black and white on the one side and the color on
Yeah.
the other side, I thought that was a great touch to
How
just
about,
really signify and have that stark contrast.
so how did they get the cool room at the very top with the window and the balcony? Like, not all the rooms are like that. There's no, when you look at the castle, there's not tons of circle balcony rooms,
White privilege.
I suppose. Or I mean, maybe with Wednesday it's the legacy thing because Morticia went to what's it called? What's the school called?
Nevermore.
Nevermore. Yeah.
This show took me too long. Like the third episode, I realized, oh, Nevermore, because Edgar Allan Poe. And I'm like, I should have realized that from the first episode.
I
But
recognize that. I put that together because of the Gilmore Girls Edgar Allan Poe episode.
yeah, I mean, The Raven is a great poem, but it's just like, duh. I felt so stupid after it. By the way, also with callbacks, I thought the use of the snap for the
Yeah,
Nightshade Society was a clever way to include that.
true. Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
here's another thing that this show does really well
yeah,
for Addams Family lore is it makes the hero Thing again. Like Thing is always the one that does the heavy lifting for the Addams Family.
yeah.
He's the hero constantly because it's like they can't give him any lines, so they can't give him anything to say, but they can give him things to do. So he's like always the one who does the heavy lifting and ends up
And
saving
they
people
give him
so
enough.
much.
They give him enough characterization that you care for him, and you actually like on the edge of your seat when is Thing dead?
Yeah.
Even though they're trying to start his heart that he doesn't have because he's a hand, but like just don't think about that. Like,
Just ignore it.
I have some stuff to say about like the Addams Family in general.
Yeah.
It was a unique idea to kind of make the rest of the family kind of side characters because
Mhm.
it's always been kind of more towards like Gomez and Morticia are like the main characters of the movies. I don't think it's the first time we've ever had it focus on Wednesday,
Yeah.
and it's like Pugsley's barely in it at all. You get a lot of thing. I mean, Lurch, you just get a cameo, but I mean, what else are you gonna do with Lurch, really?
Yeah.
And Gomez and Morticia, there's a little bit more with Morticia with the legacy, but they have like the Family Day episode, and that's mostly it. And then you get Uncle Fester for one episode, but that's it. It's like, yeah, they're here because people would be wondering why are you not even showing the rest of the family? We're waiting for them. They're like, yep,
Yeah.
we did that, and we did them well, but they were side characters. It wasn't their story. It was strictly Wednesday's story.
Yeah. And I don't feel like any of because they weren't fleshed out too, there wasn't anything special about any of these other Addams Family characters because like I have nothing against Luis Guzman, but to me he wasn't Gomez so much. Like
Yeah.
there's something about Gomez like Raul Julia did a great job for sure. The original Gomez Adams was fantastic, and even Oscar Isaac in the animated, all of them were really good Gomez's. But like Gomez is such a champ. He's we talked about him when we were talking about best
Mhm.
fathers, and he is such a good dad. Angelica Houston is like the
Yes.
Morticia Adams.
Agreed.
There's like you old TV show and in the cartoon and everything like that. Sure, they're fine, but she is golden, and there's no one that can hold a candle. Catherine Zeta-Jones does a fine job, but you just can't touch Angelica Houston. And yet Jenna Ortega comes out and like Christina Ricci did such a good job with her, and Jenna Ortega does an equally fantastic job and is
Mhm.
makes this character her own. Fred Armisen does a really good job as Fester, actually,
Yeah.
but I just don't like that they made him a bank robber. Like that doesn't fit Fester's character. All
No.
the things that he says and the lines they give him, that is very much Fester, and Fred Armisen plays it really well.
Yeah.
But
But it's
the
like
bank
they're throwing
robber
like
past, whatever.
what is something the weird and kooky? Let's give that to Fester.
Yeah, he's not a thug. He's not a criminal. You can have him be on the run for completely different reasons that would fit with Fester's character. He doesn't need to rob banks. He could have broken into a morgue to sleep in it overnight, and the people are and like sleep next to a body. That is a Fester thing to do, and he could be
Or
on the run for that.
have it be where he robs a bank by accident. He goes in just to like make a withdrawal, and everyone thinks he's like sticking him up with his like electric fingers, and he's so like out of the loop with the modern society, and he so loves like the terror and everything that he basically ends up robbing a bank without realizing he's robbing a bank, that would also be a Fester thing to do.
Yeah. So how about so for all the Addams Family, how did you feel about those comparisons I made? Who'd you
I
like? Who'd you didn't like?
I think you're right. I think Angelica Houston is the best one, and I just can't see Luis Guzman as anyone but Luis Guzman. Yeah. So then, I mean, Lurch was good. Lurch was good, but again, Lurch. All you have to do is have someone big and scary, looking like Frankenstein, and like if you have a personality for Lurch, you did it wrong.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
like I think the worst one was Pugsley, just because like they didn't do anything with him.
Yep. And like, not that the actor who played Pugsley is bad, he just didn't have anything,
Yeah.
but he also didn't give his lines anything special. Where it's like Luis Guzman, he didn't have a lot to do, but
Mhm.
he still gave his lines like a professional actor would, where it's
Yeah.
like, he did something with them, even though it wasn't a lot to do.
Yeah. If it wasn't the Addams Family, this was a new family, a new story. It wouldn't be as bad because like okay, because you might focus more, have like an episode focusing on your main character's family, even just
Yep.
for a few episodes, but you wouldn't have like the 50-year history to base them off of. So we're
Yeah.
probably judging them more now.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Like that's one of the hard parts with doing anything that's this established lore. And like
Mhm.
that's why as good as this show was in its writing, the beginning of it was really hard to get past because I have my expectations of what Addams Family should be.
Yeah.
So,
So I have a negative. Remember I said I had a positive and a negative, and my negative comes with a Power Rangers anagram or
a Power Rangers anagram?
not anagram. What's it called? A Power
You go if you
Rangers.
rearrange the letters of Power Rangers.
What's the word? Metaphor.
There you go.
Okay.
That's probably accurate.
Okay. So they wanted to make it seem like Xavier might be the monster. He's the one that shows up whenever the monster's there, and Wednesday is accusing him. I don't think they did a good enough job as to actually explaining why he was there each time. I know that when he showed up after they were at the house, it was because he went to the dorm and Thing told him where they were. But I don't. I think it was just too convenient. They're like, oh, okay, monster shows up, Xavier's got to be there. But I think they should have been more clever as to saying why was he there every time actually, instead of just seeing, oh, he just happened to be there.
Yeah, maybe. I that didn't distract me, and that does, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I didn't view that as much of a negative as you did, but there's probably truth to that. Like you could easily make him like because he has that painting ability. You can have a little bit of tie-in of like Isaac from a Hero season one, where like not only does he paint and it comes to life, but that the painting could also tell a little bit of a story, and that can be
Yeah,
how it's getting because it's like it clearly affects him, and
yeah.
he does have a little bit of like future sight in it because he paints
Mhm.
things that no one else knows, and that's what actually gets him in trouble.
Yeah.
So,
Well, maybe the reason is because of this Power Rangers thing that still bugs me. So in Power Rangers Zeo, this will be a slight. I'll try to make this quick. Billy, the original Blue Power Ranger, was not actually. We'll talk about him later. Actually, was not a Power Ranger. He was in this season was like an advisor. He hung out with Alpha and Zordon and did tech stuff for him. And then at one point there was a mysterious Gold Ranger that shows up, and it's like a mystery. Who is it? And everyone suspected it was Billy. And every time the Gold Ranger showed up, Billy was mysteriously not there, and he'd show up and he'd be all cagey, like, "Oh, sorry guys, I missed you," but, all that. And then it turns out Billy wasn't the Gold Ranger; it was a Gold Herring. But they never went back and explained why was Billy gone each time? Why was he being all cagey and secretive? None of that was ever explained. That's just lazy writing.
he does what he wants. He's Billy. He's got his own compass he goes by.
I mean, there's a fan theory that makes sense. He created the turbo powers, but that's for another podcast that we're probably not going to do because Matt doesn't want to.
Yeah, gosh, that can be our finale. Once we're finally done doing these, we'll be like, all right, we have to do a Power Rangers to end it. You're welcome.
Cool. That means we're never going to do the Power Rangers.
That's true, because
All
we're
right.
never ending.
Yep.
Not even death can stop us.
Well, I think death can stop us.
You don't know that. You say that. Speaking of death and stopping you, okay, well that this isn't really tying that, but that was another part of like the Addams Family stuff that it's like all of a sudden Wednesday has powers. Like again, I feel like this show maybe could have stood on its own a little better in my eye. I don't know
Mhm.
because That's the delicate balance. Would we be talking about this if it wasn't Addams Family? Would it be as popular if it wasn't Addams Family,
Yeah,
or would it be one of the other countless like young adult novels come to life
yeah,
almost? Because that's really what it is. You got the love
yes,
triangle, you've got the female protagonist who only she can solve it, and none of the adults trust her, and yet
yeah,
she's also special, and she's like this chosen one. She's this key. Like
yeah.
you
And you
you
got
check
the
all the boxes.
yeah, and you got the mean girl bully, the siren girl who they didn't really do anything with.
Yeah. So I
Okay.
mean, they need. I guess it makes sense they did that, but like it distracted me more than I felt like it enhanced the story. But
Yeah.
that's just because I don't know. Maybe that's how people felt about the Halo show. Maybe that's how people felt about Rings of Power, which we're talking about in about a month. So
I gotta watch stuff.
I gotta watch things.
I finally got caught up with Wednesday for this episode, and then Matt reminds me, "Oh yeah, Better Call Saul's coming up." Like, oh crap, I still haven't watched the new season. So coming up eventually is a Better Call Saul podcast when I watch it.
I'll get there. I'll watch it. Then I'll tell you how I felt.
If I can do a mad dash binge of Andor, I can finish anything for the podcast if I plan it out in time.
That's true. That's true. See, and that's the other thing. You force fed, you shoveled Andor down your gullet instead of just taking it in and breathing it and just feeling the show, you know?
You know what, for you and for Jeff, I will eventually give Andor another shot. Okay,
I mean, it'll probably be like 4 years from now when you have a little more time. I don't know.
and I'll be like, well, it took me like what 8 years to watch Rogue One.
Yeah, he got around to it. It's fine.
Yeah. So I think if I'm remembering, I think I covered everything that I needed to cover about Wednesday. You have anything else?
No, because it's like we could go with, oh, what's your favorite arc? But I mean, it was all so contained. That was
Mhm.
another part that was really good about the writing of this is that there wasn't like a lot of fluff. Even when they had a little bit of detours to flesh out, like for instance, the Morticia and Gomez thing from the past, the flashbacks that they had,
Mhm.
or when they're doing the competition for the rowing that like race that they do,
Mhm.
it still never took too much time away, and it helped to also develop the characters as they're doing. I didn't feel like there was excess that really
Yeah.
distracted or got thrown on the floor. I appreciate that about this show. There wasn't a lot of extra threads to follow. So I guess the only thing that I can think of to ask about is it has been renewed for a second season.
Mhm.
What do you want to see out of a second season?
I want to see them develop these characters more. Like I wouldn't mind if they. I'm sure they'll have more Adams Family cameos, but it's like honestly, if we don't see Uncle Fester again, I won't be mad. If we don't see, you know, Pugsley or Lurch, obviously they'll bring Thing back. They'll probably have Gomez, Morticia. Those are the three I think you have to bring back.
Yeah, and
And
I'm
my
sure if I'm sure they'll bring her grandma in because the grandma was not in
oh,
this
that's right,
episode at
yeah.
all, or in
Or
this
maybe
show at
they'll.
all.
Or do you think it'd be too campy and '90s to bring Cousin It into it?
They show a painting of him,
Oh, they do.
but that's as far as we get.
Okay, I don't know,
So I mean,
but
they could.
they could. I want to see more of these characters here.
Yeah,
Like I want to see Eugene come back and be part of the gang.
yeah. I like Eugene. Eugene was a good character. I didn't really care so much for the siren.
No,
Like you said, they didn't give her a ton.
I'm sure she'll be back, but
Yeah.
like
Even Xavier was a little flat because the interest of his character
mhm,
was either A, his ability to draw, or B, the red herring of him being the creature.
yeah,
Same with Tyler, actually. Tyler to me wasn't that important, like not
yeah,
important. He wasn't that interesting of a character. The love triangle was probably the weakest part of the whole show
yeah,
to me.
yeah. But I mean, I think the your gold mine is continuing the Enid and Wednesday relationship with Thing along for the ride.
Yeah, and you know what's the one thing too that we haven't talked about that the internet blew up about?
What was that?
Wednesday's dance
Oh yeah,
during at the Raven. I saw those memes before anything else.
me
And so then
too.
when I was actually almost underwhelmed by it because like
Yeah,
I knew that was coming and it's like, "Oh, okay, this is her dance." I think it would have been better had I not seen that at all and then just be like, "Oh, Wednesday's dancing." And I think that's why people responded so much to it because it was so out of character for her.
it was. Yeah,
Well, I'm glad we talked
Yeah,
about
yeah.
it.
I don't have anything else to say. Like, this is what happens when we agree too much. I'm like, yes, agreed.
Brian, you're wrong about all of your feelings.
Oh no. I'm
That's
mad at
right,
you for
guys.
that.
I got it.
This is a controversial podcast here. Fighting words.
You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the final season of The Office when the Dwight Jr. character, when they're doing the pitch to the father son, and then it changes on a dime the dynamic when
Mhm.
Dwight Jr. is out of the room and he's just trying to like struggle to catch up of like, how do I go along with what is Dwight doing? Like
Yeah.
you agreeing has that same energy. Or just like, ha, I just burned him.
Yeah.
Just like not fully committing, but you know,
Yeah. Pretty much.
there you go. Well, that is our talk about Wednesday. Let us know, what did you guys think? Did you think it was good? Do you think it deserves a second season, or did you think it was deserved to be the way of like other Netflix shows where it's like after one season you just cut it? Even if people liked it, you just kill it. I think they wouldn't do that because of A, it was received well, but B, this because Tim Burton did a lot with this,
Hmm.
it felt like this was a Tim Burton baby, and you don't specifically do that with someone who has as much clout as Tim Burton.
And I feel like lately a lot of stuff is getting second seasons and more stuff lately, which is funny. So this was a, a random thing. This is when I was a kid or a teenager going to any movie with my dad in the theaters, any movie at all, he would always say, you know, they're setting us up for a sequel right here. And it could be the most like happily ever after, everything's tied up in a bow. He's like, I think they're setting us up for a sequel here. I'm like, not every movie gets a sequel.
Dad, the entire world was destroyed. We watched an apocalypse movie and they let every single character die. Yeah, you know what? I think they got more they can do though.
Yeah, it was like a little bit of a catchphrase. He's not listening to this.
No, of course not.
All right. So Matt, what was last week's trivia?
Last week's trivia, we talked about what did we talk about? Because I know we got to Power Rangers eventually.
It was
Hang
about
on.
New Year's resolutions.
That's right. So last week we talked about our New Year's resolutions, not ours, but characters from TV shows. And we're like, if a TV character could come up with a New Year's resolution, this is what they should have. It was a pretty funny show. I liked it. But we each had a number of resolutions. And one of them I talked about was from Power Rangers character. And so the trivia had to do with Power Rangers. Which actor who was also a lead on another show we talked about last week, was a guest star in the early seasons of Power Rangers, the first season, and that was
Bryan Cranston, who did the voice
Brian.
of the monsters Snizzard and Twin Man. I didn't have to look it up. I just knew that. And
Of
also,
course he did.
the voice of the Blue Ranger, Billy, who I mentioned earlier in this episode, his last name is Cranston. Billy Cranston, named after Bryan Cranston, which is why he came back, 25 years later in the 2017 movie to play Zordon.
Bryan Cranston, not Billy the Blue Ranger, but yes, Bryan
Yes,
Cranston
true.
came back. Oh man, Bryan Cranston, if you can get him, you can book him. Hey, speaking of Bryan Cranston and the Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad universe and everything, so the Golden Globes, I know this is going to be a little bit late after that, but for where we're at, the Golden Globes were earlier this week, and in Better Call Saul, or actually in Breaking Bad, Bob Odenkirk makes this comment. He's like, well, one time I convinced a woman that I was Kevin Costner, and you know what? She believed it because I believed it. And so then we actually see that reference in Better Call Saul. Well, anyway, Bob Odenkirk was up for Best Actor in a drama, and he was up against Kevin Costner in Yellowstone, who won. And Bob Odenkirk's son tweeted like, all he had to do was believe he was Kevin Costner one more time. That's all he had to do.
That's funny. I love when something like that comes full circle.
That was great. All right.
All right, so this week's trivia, Gomez Addams, Wednesday's dad, is played in this movie by Luis Guzman. And Luis Guzman is talking about how he misses going to Nevermore. He had such great times there. What other TV show had Luis Guzman talking about his great times at a school he went to?
MASH.
Yes.
I
Well, I
knew
know
it.
Matt knows this because you didn't hear this, listeners, but Matt blurted this out earlier because he didn't know that was my trivia question, but I will have cut that out so you didn't hear that.
Yeah. Hey,
Gotcha.
hijack. So Catherine Zeta-Jones had a big end of year with TV because she was also in the National Treasure show. And boy, that I'm not enjoying. That's just a boring show. Let
I
me tell
didn't
you
watch
what.
it.
Yeah, it's like, but they are still like referencing the National Treasure, I guess, universe. Like they mentioned Ben and stuff like that, and it's like you guys are clearly still wanting to do a National Treasure 3. Can you just do that instead?
Yeah.
I want to see that a million times more than I want to see these characters that I don't really care
Yeah.
too much about running around.
It's a shame. You see, Catherine Zeta-Jones. I mean, this is someone who was an A-list star. I mean, she was Mrs. Michael Scarn, and now she's down to just being in the National Treasure show.
I remember when she came on the scene with Mask of Zorro, and like what a good movie that was, and she does such a good job in that too. And then like her career blew up after that, and she's still going strong. But
Mm,
I don't know. I didn't like National Treasure, so
yep.
sorry.
So
But we
hey,
showed the first
yeah.
movie to my son Elijah, and he's like, "This is the best movie I've ever seen." So there's
Well, he
that.
also said the Santa Clauses was his favorite TV show.
You know what? Let's maybe not mock his choices. We don't let him watch too many TV shows, all
Well,
right?
no, he tried to back later. He's like, I didn't say that.
He should be on it again. That was a lot of fun to
It
have
was a lot of
Elijah
fun to have
on.
fun there.
It
Yeah.
was a very unique dynamic for sure, but
Mhm.
now you got a little bit of a glance into my life as a parent. So,
Yep. One, and then multiply that by four.
exactly. I mean, Elijah is the most that way. Like they all have very obviously distinct personalities because
Yes.
all kids do. But yeah, he is that goofy slash antagonizing type. And so like what you saw or what you heard in that episode is
Mhm.
really what he's like. So if you
Yep.
haven't heard that one, go listen to Santa Claus's episode. Even if you're like, I didn't watch that show, just go listen to it because it's worth it because he's funny.
Yep. And then tune in next week. We're going to be talking about some funny people with a return guest.
Yeah. Andrew Elmquist, he hasn't been around for a little bit, or like we haven't had him on our show for probably over a year.
Yeah,
So it's
it's
been a bit.
been about a year and a half. Yeah.
Yep. So make sure you're listening to that. And if you're like a fan of stand up, then listen to that. If you're not a fan of stand up, then listen to that episode anyway, and then go watch some of the stand up that we talk about because there's going to be
Exactly.
some really funny people that we hit on. So
Yep.
not hit on, like we're not going to. Anyway, hey,
Wait, we're not going to go hit on Jeff Foxworthy?
not anymore. Not after not after this restraining order I got in the mail.
All right.
Well, the final thing I want to say is I really did not use the word macabre as much as I thought I was going to. So,
Oh,
nope, not even close.
you
So,
were
you
optimistic on
betters
that
out
one.
there, it was two. That's where we landed.
All
Two.
right. If you guessed two, you were right on the money.
Yep. If you took the under, you get paid. So,
By who's paying people off?
in order to get paid, make sure you hit that like button and share this as well with all of your friends. That's how you get paid for that bet, and then you just keep checking your Venmo and see when it comes up. So
Yep.
until until next time, don't hold me accountable. I'm Matt,
I'm Brian.
and
I'm
we're reminding
things.
you, gosh, and we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.